Hey associates! Alright, so this video I'm just going to cover some additional professional and workplace documents as well as kind of a collection of other things to consider when you're going through that career kind of process, including things like salary negotiations and just being able to track your projects and accomplishments. Yeah, so it should be fun. So one of the first documents I just want to kind of talk about is this idea of a license agreement. So a license agreement is just documentation of a deal between the owner and someone who wants to use your goods and your services. Basically, it's going to be granting, permission with a lot of stipulations. So for those of you, who might be going to things like freelance, maybe you're in graphic design, or some of those other, writing and creative industries, you'll probably have a license agreement there, or make sure that you're getting a license agreement so that way you're protected for the people who are using your work. And with the license agreement, they can be really simple, they can be really kind of intense, it sort of depends, but basically you're going to have this really important section where you talk about the rights retained by you as the author. And so definitely for those of you who might be writing up your own license agreements, for people who want to use your creative work, this is going to be a really important section. And so you can also see on this page they use some document design features to help us stay organized. This is section 3. The previous 2 sections, that was one that I received for, I had a book review published. Just kind of talked about, okay, here's what we're going to use it for, and here's, when it's going to be used and how it's going to be used. And then this section is all about, here's the rights that, I get to retain as the author of that. And just, number them out and make sure it's really clear and you kind of cover all the different rights that you want. Yeah, and then there's also, warranties made by you. So basically that's like the things that you sort of promise happened with your work. So that's kind of the first thing. Just keep in mind, if you're in that situation where you need a license agreement, definitely, make sure you go through the proper channels and get it sort of vetted and make sure you're not missing anything. And if you receive a license agreement, obviously make sure that you really read it and make sure you're not, breaking any of these agreements that you have going. And of course, if there is some sort of transaction occurring, you want to make sure that you have a whole section dedicated to that and how it's going to be used. All right, a second thing just to kind of keep in mind is insurance policies and just how they're kind of written. So this is for Gatsby's insurance, but it's very similar to human health insurance, honestly. So again, we see some really nice document design going on, right? They have little paragraphs so that we can see there's so many lines and paragraphs, it actually makes it choppy and more difficult to read, which you talk about document design to help readers. Is the insurance company using document design to make it harder to kind of understand? Maybe, but it's definitely something to keep in mind, right? And so it's kind of like, okay, cool. But you can all see they're saying like, okay, words and phrases that appear in bold type. That's good to know. So here's bold type, good. The words we, us, and our refer to the company, so they're kind of defining everything. And then, okay, right, section 1, insuring agreement, and then it kind of explains all of this. Now, of course, then they say, okay, well, there's exclusion and limitations. Obviously, they're not going to tell us all of those here. So then you need to jump down to 1B, 1C, and 1D to get those answers. So just, as you're writing documents and as you're reading over things like insurance policies, make sure that then you do jump to 1B, C, and D and try to find that section. They also have some bullet points, right? More bold to show that this is going to be in the glossary. And then definitely these are like the 2 key things to definitely keep in mind. And I say that because a while back, Gatsby had to go to the dog hospital, right? And so we have this great insurance with that. And then you can kind of see how the co-insurance, right? The share you pay on a claim, deductible, the amount you pay before the insurance covers the claim, come into play here. And so if you're like, oh yeah, I'm insured for all this great stuff, it's going to be awesome. Actually, we only got this much reimbursed. But again, we can see how they were playing with document design to really play up the value of the company and downplay actually what they were giving us back. So total covered, right? This is a nice big fat number. You're like, oh, well, cool, not covered. Okay, that's awesome. So that's all I should have to pay. But then, and those are in bold, so it stands out. So that's what you think when you first look at the page, like, yes. But then kind of buried in here, we actually see, oh, my reimbursement's actually only this much. So this is another example of like document design that, you know, document design can be used to really help your readers, or it can be used in other ways. So just kind of pay attention to how companies and people are using things like document design. But here's some really good examples too of, you know, they're listing out all the different things with bullet points. So I can really see like what they were charged for Gatsby's time and what wasn't charged and whatnot. So just gotta keep, you know, those little things in mind when you're looking at some of these other professional documents that are, you know, gonna come up, and pay attention to like the design and what things they try to draw your eye to and what things they try to bury, and, you know, what that does for you as a user and a consumer. All right, the third kind of random, but, you know, growing in common sort of occurrence are these communication related contracts. You may have heard a lot about things like NDAs in the news, but basically communication contracts at the end of the day want you not to talk about something within the company. It could be a behavior, but it also more likely is like a process, a product, trade secrets, financial information, sensitive client data. Those are the likely things under these communication contracts. Sometimes they're called NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality agreements, and all sorts of proprietary information. So that's definitely, if you sign one of these, that's going to be, you know, the company, maybe you've developed some new process or calculation or product, and they want you to sign this proprietary information agreement saying like you're not going to go share this information because it belongs right to the company and they don't want it being talked about, probably to protect them from the market, right, and the competitors. The most common positions, you might have to sign these in any position, but the most common, if you're going to be working for the government, you definitely are going to be signing a lot of these, and it kind of depends on how high up in the government. So one summer I was an intern for the National Park Service, the Forest Service, so I did have to sign a blanket agreement. But of course, you know, reports on forest health is pretty low on the sort of sensitive and security data clearance. So that's why it's kind of a blanket, like, don't, you know, reproduce these reports unauthorized, basically. And the higher up you get into the government and some of the, you know, sectors, if you especially are going into more of the military branches, you know, they're not going to want you to talk about anything probably. So you will likely encounter one of these. Research and development positions also are likely to have, you know, some of these proprietary and confidentiality agreements. Again, because you are developing new products or things or systems for the company, they don't want that information getting out to the marketplace because then they're going to lose money on it. And then lastly, if you're working with any personal or sensitive data, so those of you going into healthcare, definitely you're going to have to, you know, you're gonna have to sign documents saying you won't disclose, you know, patient data. If you're going into finance and economics, then, you know, you probably are gonna sign one of these as well, because again, financial data is pretty considered sensitive and they don't want you just going around and leaking that information out there. Now, what happens if you break these? I mean, it depends, right? So make sure you pay attention to the limitations and what's outlined in the document that you sign. However, you know, it kind of depends. It's expensive for companies to really go for these, but if you sign it, as Ron Watson has been telling you on this whole slide, right, you know, you just need to keep it quiet. All right. Now let's talk about, getting the job or not getting the job, and just other kind of HR types of documents that you might encounter in the workplace, just to be aware of, and we can talk about the design of those as well. So here's an example of not getting the job and just like why it might take a long time. So I applied to this position at Boise State in November of 2018, and it was, one of those like, that'd be cool, I might as well try. If anything, it's good practice. I definitely encourage you to just, if you see a job that you're like, I really, really want that and think it'd be awesome, just apply, right? The worst that they'll say is no, and maybe it'll work out. So anyway, point is, I applied to this in November, and I didn't get this email until the end of March. So that, the hiring process can take a really long time sometimes, and be really short at other times. Of course, if I had, gotten into the interview stage, I'm sure I would have heard back in like December or something. But just kind of be aware that sometimes it does take a while. So if you maybe aren't graduating until maybe, I don't know, winter or something, or it's April, you don't graduate till May, then don't be afraid to start applying to some of these positions, because it really can take a few months before they're really ready for you to actually start working anyway. But common, right? I don't know how many of you experience rejection, but it'll probably start off with, thanks for interest in the position. We've chosen to go, with other candidates, and that's usually all you're going to get. If you are not chosen for a position, they don't usually go into a lot of detail about why you weren't chosen, which can sometimes be a little bit frustrating for job candidates. And you can always ask. I have a feeling it's because I hadn't actually, finished my degree yet and would have to move to Boise. But they often don't really tell you. So that's kind of an example of maybe what a rejection looks like. And then a little bit later, I'll show you what an offer letter might look like. Oh, right here. So we go from rejection, womp womp, to offers. So I have two different offer letter examples to show you, but they all have the same basic thing. So this is one that I received over the summer. Because I got the job, hooray! And that's what an offer letter is, right? So if you are being rejected, then you'll get an offer. This is after the interview process, of course. And offer letters are things that you sign basically to say, okay, yeah, I commit and accept and I want this position. So this first one, right, we can see so it's the first paragraph, right? Just like our cover letters and other emails and whatnot, they chunk it into nice paragraphs for us. So the first one, right, made it out to me. They're telling me, hey, purpose statement. What's the purpose of this document? Well, because they're offering me this position, you should see the title of your position. If the title is different than what you talked about in the interview or what you thought you had applied to, that's take note of that and contact them immediately, because whatever is in this offer letter is probably is what's going to go into your file, and titles matter to an extent. So make sure it's the title that you were looking for. It's going to tell you like sort of where, what division, if that's applicable. They'll tell you the salary, right, and what benefits you might be getting. And then any steps that need to be completed before you start work, and then you'll have your work date, right? So all of that, if we think about our inverted triangle, right, the key information, purpose statement, right? People care about the money in the offer, they care about when they start. So they put all that in the first paragraph. Second paragraph is probably just going to be more, just general information, terms, conditions are here with some links for more places I can go. And then action items sort of in this bottom one. So, right, if it's acceptable, I have to sign it. They have a date when I have to return it by. Other forms that I need to complete, which were, attached with it. And so these are all just the instructions, right? And so when we look at this from the document design standpoint, we have the really key information that the candidate, right, that I care about. Hey, I got the job. Here's what I'm going to get paid. Here's when I start. And then at the bottom, they have the important action items. And then in the middle, the most likely skipped over paragraph is, information that it's okay if I skip over it, right? And then they end with a nice little conclusion of, hey, thanks for joining. Here's some contact information. And then, of course, sign and date. Oh, and the timing on this one, so whereas the last one, right, was November to March, this one I had applied in like early May, and I was interviewing by the end of May, and then I received this in the beginning of June. So it was basically less than a month kind of turnover for this particular job. It was a very kind of fast thing. So sometimes it happens fast. Sometimes it doesn't, but again, if you see a job that you like, I just encourage that you go ahead and just start applying for it, because the worst that happens is you spent, half an hour on this application, got some good practice, got a good cover letter out of it, and then they say no. And that's not really that bad of a scenario. All right, so then here's another example. This is one for an internship that I had several years ago. But same thing, right? Opening sentence. Offering me the position, right? Then they give me the information. Here's where you're gonna start. This one was set up slightly differently, right? So nice bold purpose statement. Some background information. Middle paragraph is some good information, and honestly, they probably, again, who knows, but they're on the document design standpoint. Right, the middle paragraph is most likely to be kind of skimmed over, and so they also buried, right, the fact that it's unpaid kind of in the middle. Obviously, I knew that applying to it, and we knew it from the interview, but it's certainly not something they advertised up here in that opening one for the offer letter, burying it a little bit, our commitment, and then again, ending with the conclusion, excited to work with you, blah, 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 and then I had to sign it down below. All right, so there's kind of two examples. You can see how they have the same general pattern and where you should be looking for the information, right? So double check that the hours and any kind of salary and the start date are sort of consistent with what you had talked about and were expecting. All right, what else? Oh, and on that note, of consistent with what you were expecting, it's also important, like if you had talked about in the interview, that this was going to be part-time work, or that it was full-time, but 20 hours a week you're going to be working from home, and it doesn't say anything about it in the offer letter, it could be worth checking in with HR and the person that you had interviewed with to ensure you can get that language in there, because writing and this written document that you sign is always going to trump some, verbal correspondence that you have. And so if there is something that you're like, wait, it's not going to work, or I can't start on the 13th, like address that right away and see if they can get it changed. So that way all your paperwork is consistent and you're just protected and are advocating for yourself. All right. So then once you get the job, we have performance evaluations. And so here's an example. This is at that same place where the offer letter was, the Go Abroad. And so you kind of see, right, outstanding to needs improvement. So it's a little bit similar to, how you might be graded, right? So your boss isn't going through and assigning itty-bitty point values for every single, thing in the category. It's kind of an overall, you're doing outstanding or you're below expectations. Now this one was interesting, right? Because I had a place for self-evaluation and then also a place for the supervisor. So I had to sort of fill in for myself how I felt about my communication and if I was, translating ideas, etc., and sort of rank myself. And then they gave me a rank as well. And so, we can kind of see here, like, oh, I gave yourself a 4 on problem solving, right? Justified it with explanation. And, my supervisor gave me feedback. And then this one, initiative, right? Me and I gave myself 4 again. Obviously, giving yourself self-critique is interesting. She's agreed, gave me a 3. Basically, do more during your free time. And I will admit, right, this was an unpaid internship and I was 22 or 23. And I definitely was not motivated to do a lot of extra projects, after I'd finished, I was already assigned for free. So that was a good growth opportunity for me to kind of reevaluate and find more intrinsic, things, and also a cue to me that maybe this industry and this line of work wasn't exactly where my passion and interests were, because I felt so unmotivated. So, it can be good to give yourself a little self, reflection and acknowledge your weaknesses. So and evaluations often occur it depends on the company. It could be 3 months, like every quarter, to 6 months, to some places only do them on the year. And usually performance evaluations also occur with raises and promotions. So kind of follow that cycle. All right, and when it's time for that performance evaluation, maybe you want to negotiate your salary and get a little bit of a raise, or if you have made it to that last round of the interview, maybe they gave you the offer letter, but the salary is a little bit low and they indicate there's room for negotiation. It's worth doing that. But there's a few things you can do to really improve your chances of getting the salary that you want. So first, I just need to definitely acknowledge, right, wage disparities and salary and income inequality is still, it's a very real issue that we certainly are working through as a culture. And for some of you, this will be a bigger issue and bigger deal than others, just based on your identity and what we call intersectionality, right? And intersectionality and how you can kind of figure out how you need to navigate the world and what strategies you might need to use or how you need to respond differently. It's going to come from your gender, your race, your age, your educational background, your class background, your orientation, your religion. Like there's every little kind of piece of your identity intersect to form sort of your position in society. And so it's up to all of you to figure out what your own positionality is and what it means within our culture, and what it means within your specific workplaces and your own workplace cultures. But just keep in mind, like some of you might have to do things a little bit differently and work to sort of prove yourself in different ways than others. So be aware of where you might be at social, culturally, when you go into these negotiations. So step 1 to negotiate salary, definitely return to that first essay that we did, right? Researching the different jobs and the industry and growth and whatnot. And, kind of look back and, okay, well, what's the average salary for someone at your position with your experiences and skills in your area, right? And that can give you a really good starting place to see, is this offer low? Is this offer actually really high? And you feel like, just take it. Are you actually at that sort of average value level? And a few tools that can help you get started with that. Pay scale website can be really helpful. Glassdoor can give you some salary insights. And then also look at cost of living calculators. That can be a really big thing as well. It's like, hey, it's really expensive to live here. I need to be, making more money. So come in knowing exactly what a typical salary looks like, so you aren't just pulling a number out of nowhere, but you're actually in line with industry and area standards. Second, be concrete, right? Always. I feel like I say that with everything, but just always be concrete. So know ahead of time, what benefits you bring as an employee. So you need to be able to have your value and then know what that is. And keep in mind, if you're asking for a raise, it also is this assumption that you're going to take on some more responsibility and that you're actually adding more value to the company, right? So you need to really be able to outline exactly what those are. So maybe ask yourself, are you ready for more responsibility, right? Are you ready for that extra value that's going to be expected from you at this higher pay grade? Second, ask yourself, have you gained more skills and experiences? And write down specifically what those are compared to when you first started at the company. And always just be, really thoughtful about what your employer wants from you, but also you need to advocate for yourself and know, what you want from your employer. So that way it can be a good sort of reciprocal relationship, and you'll be adding value and sort of happy and productive and satisfied as an employee, which, helps the company. But definitely make sure that you really know, like, I am this valuable and this is the average salary and I'm below it, even though I have gained all these skills since starting at your company. And so one way you can help yourself be more concrete is to keep track of all your accomplishments in like an Excel sheet or something, right? So here's an example of what you might do. So just get a basic Excel sheet and have, date, the project, and then very importantly, have the outcomes of that project. So again, you can go to your employer and say, this is what I am bringing to the company, and this is why I feel like I deserve, this promotion or this raise. So you might say, okay, you can do it by specific projects or by a range. So let's say that you created a new little training materials, little training manual, and after you gave all the people on your team or whatever this training manual that you made, you saw, a decrease in monthly reporting errors by 5% or whatever it is, right? So again, you took some initiative and you created these training materials or this, little infographic or fact sheet or whatever, gave it to your peers and associates, and actually it helped with their output, and it was more efficient and corrected a lot of errors. Right? You could also talk about presentations that you've made and then what happened after you presented this new strategy you came up with. For maybe if you're, in charge of some sort of platform, right? You implemented this new Instagram campaign and it actually increased your followers by this much. And so for those of you definitely in content marketing and social media management, obviously make sure that you are able to express the change in these like great percentages and keeping really good track of all the good engagement metrics and followers. And then if you do it by like on a more of a quarterly basis, definitely at the very least have this tracked. So that way you can say, okay, well, last quarter I took on, 4 projects, helped with 3 events, and I actually attended this professional development seminar. Maybe you did it even on your own time over a weekend or something. So again, show, what you've learned, some skills, and how you are trying to be better for the company. So just go in, have all of your accomplishments and your skills and your work tracked. So that way your employer, they don't have an excuse, right? Because you're like, this is all the things I've done. And this will also help you if maybe they don't give you the raise, say, well, okay, I need to start applying to other jobs, then like, I'm sorry. This will help you with your resume and your cover letter, because now you can say, hey, I created a manual that helped decrease monthly reporting 5%, right? Nice, concrete. And step 3, if, you love the company and they're like, we just don't have, we can't do it. We don't have it to change the salary. Like there's nothing we can do for that. Shrink the change, right? Think about other ways that you can get sort of help and more positive benefits and whatnot. So it's not always just about salary. Sometimes you can look more at just living factor. So maybe you could ask them if they have any other employee benefits that they could offer you. So things like gym memberships, that could be $100 a month. That makes a little bit of a difference. A lot of companies are starting towards that trend of supporting employee wellness and whatnot. Maybe they can give you more flex dollars on your health insurance or something. Like just ask and see if there's room for them to give you more benefits. Other benefits could even be like a little lunch per diem, like maybe twice a week, right? The company will reimburse you for your lunches. Right? It's a small thing and it's a small thing for the company, but over the course of a year, that's going to really cut down on like your food costs if you at least are getting lunch paid for twice a week. Think about those little things and how you can sort of get more money without getting more money, You might also ask them about work-life balance things. So see if they can be more flexible with your hours. Say, okay, well, I understand that, you can't pay me anymore right now, but instead of working from 8 to 5, can I do, maybe like a 7 to 4 or something? Or maybe instead of 5 days a week, you could do 4 10s, right? During one internship, I did 4 10s, and it actually wasn't bad. I mean, yeah, the days were a little long. I worked like 8 to 6. And yeah, I mean, it was long, and I had like a short lunch break. But then I had every Friday off, right? So Thursdays at 6 o'clock, then I was done, and my weekend could begin. And it actually was really nice and, made it feel a lot more worth it by the end of the week. So maybe they can help you out there if they can't move the salary. Or maybe you can get more remote commuting hours. Like, okay, you can't pay me a bit more. Can we set up a home office space so I spend less time commuting here and less time on gas and whatnot, and do some of my work from home, right? That's another trend that definitely companies are starting to get on board with. And so maybe there's room for them to negotiate there. And then lastly, if you're, just getting a job, you can always ask for a signing bonus or relocation costs. These are less and less common because, it's a saturated market. And so a lot of companies, sometimes are like local candidates only, or like, we'd love to have you, but we're not going to pay to have you come out here. But you could always, ask, you never know. All right. And so lastly, just kind of like a reminder, create a paper trail, right? So make sure that when you're negotiating your salary and you're getting these benefits and whatnot, it's one thing to have a meeting and for them to say it, but then it's another thing to actually, have it in writing. So create a paper trail. So maybe you send a memo or a letter, over back to your boss, or to HR or something with all the stuff that you talked about in the meeting, right? You want to make copies of like your project spreadsheet, include that in the memo so it's all like there on paper and that like people have seen it and received it. So that way if all of a sudden they try to go back on, your flex hours, or they stop giving you lunches or whatever it is that you worked out, you have this paper trail like, no, like you confirmed and signed that like, yes, this was going to be a benefit. And then follow up, right, with the meeting, with an email, just confirming all these notes. And again, maybe that's where you attach the memo and say like, hey, thanks for that great meeting. Thanks for being really flexible and working with me. And here's what we had talked about and, what I want. So again, in the end, paper is going to trump verbal pretty much always. So make sure you have it down in writing if it's important to you. And sometimes you have to be willing to walk away, or if you aren't, make them think that you are. This is going to be easier the more experience and leverage that you gain. But mainly I say this because at one point, my partner, he wasn't even really looking. He was on, he has a really, really great LinkedIn account. It's linked to it on Canvas. And he gets messages from recruiters. And so a few years ago, he got this message from a recruiter, and they were going to move us up to Michigan and, double his salary. And it was really great, but, we didn't really want to like leave or go. But he went through the interview process and everything. And then when he went to his current company, which is where like we wanted to stay at, honestly, but they kind of were like, oh gosh, like this obviously is a valuable employee. And he had that spreadsheet. He'd been keeping a track of everything he was doing. So he also brought that into the meeting, and ended up, getting, a good promotion and a raise. And they were willing to like meet what the competing company had offered, because they realized this employee is really valuable. Here's even on paper all the ways that he's really valuable. Like, he wants to stay. We need to make sure this is a place he wants to stay at. And so that was a really good way. Also, it was good timing and everything with company growth. But, there's just one thing to keep in mind, like be active on your LinkedIn and, don't necessarily be out like applying and pursuing jobs if you are happy at your company. because that's kind of shady, but recruiters will reach out through LinkedIn if you have a really good presence and profile. And, if an opportunity arises, just be honest and be willing to be like, what, at this current company, it's not meeting XYZ. I have a new offer. And often, if you have proven yourself to be valuable to that employer, and if they really do have the room to move, they might move when they realize that other people want you because you're awesome, right? So there's just a few kind of salary negotiation things. So I know this video is also another long one, but it's just such an important concept. Obviously our issues with income inequality is really big and really wicked, but one thing that just each and every one of us can do is to practice good, negotiation, and to advocate for ourselves and make sure that you're in a place in a company that values you and that you are providing value, and make sure that they see it. So really important that, you are documenting all the things you do, because workplaces revolve around writing and documents. You're going to write some, you're going to receive some, and make sure that you're tracking your worth for that company. So that way, they know and you know exactly what you should be getting paid. And you are going to be able to find other jobs at other companies who will value you if you have all that information tracked and ready to go. Now, that was a little bit of a review. Good luck in all of your application and your salary negotiation processes. Bye.